Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
I'm Aaron Switzer, publisher of The Source and host of the Bend Don't Break podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Michelle Healy. She is the executive director over at Bend Parks and Recreation. She joined Park and Recreation District in 2013 as director of planning and development, later advancing to deputy executive director, and now serves as executive director. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from Virginia Tech and a Master of Urban and Regional Planning from Portland State University. Before her time at BPRD, Michelle spent nearly 12 years with North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District in Clackamas County. Her early recreation career included roles as lifeguard, swim instructor, pool supervisor, and office manager for a golf club grounds department. Michelle's love of the outdoors and broad background in parks and recreation fuels her dedication ensuring access for all to Bend's beautiful parks, trails, and recreation opportunities. I am guessing with your background in lifeguard swim instructor, were you did you race competitively? Were you a competitive swimmer?
I use that word lightly. I did swim on the swim team in my neighborhood pool, and then in high school I swam on the swim team. But, it was more for fun and exercise than anything else.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside D.C. primarily, in Maryland. So
I was on my local community pools swim team, and they don't really have that out here. Like in the South, I grew up in Atlanta, and every neighborhood has a little pool, and every pool has its own little swim team that they compete. And it's, I think it's a hot weather kind of thing. DC, Atlanta.
Outdoor pools, lots of outdoor pools, lots of neighborhood pools. Yeah, I was on the Cinnamon Woods swim team.
Right. I was on the East Lake swim team, which was basically a planned neighborhood that had a pool. So.
Yep. Yeah, we had these, townhomes, duplex kind of neighborhood, tons of kids, and that's all we did. We went to the pool. I think our parents were like, "See you later. Come back when the street lights go off." So.
Right. Very similar thing. It's hard to imagine that environment anymore because it just simply doesn't exist. But it was the same kind of thing. Jump on my little orange bike, ride down to the pool, hang out all day with buddies by the pool, and then ride home. The pool was the center of our social.
Yep, exactly the same thing. And then we'd also play like army tag that we created where we'd hide, we'd be in the woods, climbing in the creeks and all that stuff. And really, our parents didn't see us all day.
No,
also.
It was true. And I would get the reprimand if I was late for dinner, but they had no way to get me. I didn't have a cell phone. There was no ding, ding bell or anything. It was just like, you better not again. And maybe I would lose bike privileges or something.
Right. So, actually, I don't think they wanted to punish us. They were like, just go outside.
Yeah, right. They were glad. My mom would often say, "Aren't you going to the pool today?" And I would be like, "What? I'm watching TV." It's like,
Three's Company's on.
Get out. Get out. So, well, Michelle, how'd you end up in Bend, Oregon? How'd you get here?
Well, I was fortunate actually to meet several people that worked at Bend Park and Rec because I was in the Park and Rec world and we would be at conferences. And so I met a number of people and they were so lovely. And then there was a job that came open for the planning and development director, which, Bend has an amazing system. And so even just around the state and actually around the nation, people are like,
sure,
what a wonderful place to be. So I was able to apply for a job and fortunate enough to get it and then came over here.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I know I don't have the list here of all the accomplishments at Park and Rec but I have noted in my journalistic career here that the press release comes over, and it is quite frequent that Bend Parks and Rec, and not that I want you to badmouth Clackamas or your former job, but it is kind of a more dynamic environment over here for parks, being fair.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I North Clackamas is a park district, and it's a story of a community that grew up without parks. And so that district was created after the fact. And it said, we need some park space. And that is a really challenging place to be. You know, you're trying to put parks in when houses are built and roads are in, and it's very difficult. And so this community kind of got ahead of it. And so that's a fortunate place that we can plan ahead, try to keep up with growth, actually have the parks in place. And honestly, this district has a much better funding situation than where I was.
Sure.
And I tell people it's a great position to be in, to be able to say, you know, instead of saying no right off the bat, if somebody has an idea, you say, well, maybe we might be able to do that. Let's talk about it some more and be creative and be innovative and provide a really wonderful level of service for people. So, you know, it's fun to be here. We have a great system. I think it makes Bend extremely livable and special.
Yeah.
So fun to be part of it.
I've watched, I mean, having been publishing since 97 and obviously following Parks and Rec has been a big part of that. And, it's funny to hear you say, you know, we're so far ahead, because I can remember when trail connectivity was a thing and we were such a small town and everybody was sweating so hard about the fact that, oh, the river trail breaks up here and it breaks up there. And it did seem, I will be honest, like prior to your time certainly it did seem insurmountable. I mean, you build a bridge around Drake Park to make that connection. And I used to stand there and they would talk about connectivity, and I was like, well, not down there in the in the marsh. And so that has been a pretty exciting thing. And I mean, even though you weren't the executive director, you must have had some hand in making sure that happened.
Yeah, you know, I was fortunate. It's fun to be part of the planning and development team. I mean, that's where my background is. And so I've always enjoyed being able to build things and plan things and work with community to figure out what they are. And so that project in Drake Park specifically has been worked on for a long time. I mean, before I was here, and then even once the actual development of it started happening, it was a long time in the making. And so it's really fun to see it done now. You know, and actually it's different than I even imagined it, you know, once it's finished, but I think it fits really well in with that site, and people seem to like it. And
it's an amazing development. Yeah. Especially for someone who's, you know, watched it. I mean, for a while there, all that trail connectivity and repair of the, you know, embankment along Mirror Pond was all tied up in that struggle around Mirror Pond. And, you know, we've certainly done fun stuff and advocated enough for blowing that dam. And I won't pull you into my personal, I know Parks has played a pretty good Switzerland on the whole thing, but I also found it to be very, very bold and very, very cool that you guys were able to skate around all of that stuff, even though you could know the footprint and build along there and make improvements on an area where, I mean, politically it's been in flux for decades.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know it was, it's quite an accomplishment. The construction manager, project manager, he attributes his gray hair to that project, but it was exciting to kind of get around, I don't want to say around, but get sort of through kind of the Mirror Pond conversations, which are still out there ultimately, but to put in something, because that's a much longer conversation, I think. So.
I try to remind our reporters who don't have the historical context that conversation is still out there. I'm like, you guys, if they're not talking about it, something's happening. You just don't know. Like, it's not because the river isn't going away and all and that stuff isn't going away. But it is a beautiful, beautiful connection over there. And now that, I mean, speaking a little more to the current times, I mean, when you look at the way Bend has grown, and for people who are, you know, downtown Bend centric, who might not know about canal, trail projects and things that are much further, what do you look at as your biggest challenge as we start to push into these areas?
Well, I would say that there's a variety of challenges. Sure. Some of them are more downtown specific and core area. You know, this is all getting more dense. And so what does that mean for parks? You know, you're not going to have these big expanses of green space, right? But you're going to have a lot of people. So as we're thinking ahead, it's like, well, what does that look like? It's probably not going to look like the same parks that we've had before. And then, of course, going out, you still see some of that as well. Like these neighborhoods are even more dense. The houses are closer and closer together. Just like everybody else, we got to buy land at market rates, and that's
Do you still
crazy.
look to do park purchase acquisition within the UGB?
We do, because that's where all the people are, right? And so that's, one of our goals is that people have access to parks that they can walk to, so that I don't have to put my child or my friend or whomever it is in the car and drive across town because I want to get on a playground or I want to play on a sports team. The hope is that people can get out of their house, walk, ride a bicycle, and it's easy, and they're not crossing the railroad track or 97 or some big barrier street.
Yeah.
So we do. We also, think about the future. We bought some land this last year that's outside the UGB.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. That's 450 acres for $4 million. We bought 4 acres within the UGB for $4 million. So it just shows you, and the one outside the UGB is a third of a mile from the UGB boundary.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about when we think about.
That's why I kind of, in my own limited understanding, just didn't see a role or a possibility for parks in actually acquiring land. Now it feels like that's one of those ships has sailed issues. I mean, for a while, I know there's all those pocket parks, and there was that effort to try to come up with a dream of connecting those pocket parks and making more from that. But it does seem like as the town grows, you gotta move with it. I know the city's considering another UGB expansion coming up here.
Yep.
That's got to be a big part of what you guys work on. Is you're like, oh crap, they're going. Well, and they don't even know where they're going now, right? They're going. Are they going to go here? Are they going to go here?
Yeah, the beauty of planning. You're doing
and coordination.
And coordination.
Right.
It's a lot. I mean, we are fortunate. We have really good partners at the city planning, in their long range planning, and they try to keep us informed, and we try to keep them informed and line things up.
Right.
Because you're absolutely right. It's a lot easier to get it early on, as I mentioned, just from my prior work experience. But, we have a lot of developers in town that we work with, when they're coming in with a new subdivision or a new, community that they're building. We try to, let's get together and talk before it actually, the ground is broken and the plats are created. And we've had good fortune with several of the developers to sort of say, okay, this is important. And especially if they do master plans, you can kind of start to envision.
But having good relationships is great, but you also have sticks. I mean, you have things in place where it's like, hey, this is a large enough development. You got to have park space. You got to have green space. I mean, that's a nice thing about Bend is, they don't get carte blanche. There are certain things that we as a community ask of them, and you have to play that role of like, hey.
Yeah. So, well, and, we have, the city has some code that can help us with the really big developments. It's not a perfect situation. There's some things that we'd love to see differently because, we spend a lot of money on land. And that's what it takes to have it. And in a lot of cases, we have to get smaller pieces of property because the costs have gone up for everybody, right? I mean, anybody who's trying to do business, whatever.
Sure.
But we also know that a lot of those developers do recognize the value of what parks and open space and trails bring to their community. So a lot of times they want to work with us. Yeah. Sometimes it's just a matter of trying to line it up so it actually works for what they're trying to do too. So.
I always assume that listeners and readers and now viewers are aware that you guys are your own taxing entity. Mm-hmm. You're not, in just up the road in Redmond, that's not the case in most communities, I would say that's not the case. That puts you in a pretty enviable position. It's a nice place to be. Your funding's not, if there are needs from fire or police, it doesn't pull from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are very fortunate here in Bend to have a special district. Interestingly enough, there are more special districts in the state of Oregon than any other type of government. but it's probably the least understood and
Yeah.
the least recognized, you know,
Yeah.
but you know, there's special districts for everything, right?
Sure.
Roads, water, sewer, fire.
Right.
And it's partially because people have said, hey, I want to prioritize that and I want to make sure my funding goes to that. And
Right.
that's what happened here. You know, the city back in the 70s, I think it was the year I was born, said that, you know, they couldn't fund some pool stuff. And, you know, that was the challenge. And
Right.
so the district kind of came to be then as,
Right.
hey, we want to focus on this. And it is a good place to be, at least from a sustaining your park system situation, because cities are in a tough spot a lot of times,
Yeah.
you know, balancing a lot of things. And, you know, talking to my colleagues that work in other types of government, parks sometimes is not the highest priority when it comes to funding.
Yeah.
And even though it has a huge impact on
Right.
livability and, you know, health and the environment and all kinds of things,
Right.
but there's tough choices. So.
I've always felt like that particular decision, which probably didn't, I don't know, maybe those founding fathers and park lovers knew what they were doing, but it has a way of shaping the community's core values, because it's not, I think, as a separate taxing entity, it's not other. It's a vital part of your culture. You will pay for it. It's separate, and it's not like you get to come and decide. Like you can't. It sits outside of all the other prioritizations that need to happen when a city is planning how to move forward, and consequently, we have fabulous trails and parks because of that decision way back when. And you know, Parks has been a good steward, I believe, of those funds going forward. And but that, I don't think people understand when they're riding around the trails, that it all goes, I think, to a large part, because we know in government, or maybe my readers and listeners don't know, man, people always want those funds. If they're discretionary, then it's the biggest dog in the pack who's going to come and get them. And fortunately, you're on the other side of the fence from that.
Yeah. Well, and you know, Bend is a very desirable and special place to be. And I think many people, they tell us the parks are a big part of that. The parks are why we chose to live here, why we want to have our business here, you know, why we spend our time here. And I always say to people, when I go to another community, I don't necessarily, I'm really happy they have sewers and water, but that's not what I'm going to remember about my time visiting that place. I'm probably going to remember some outdoor activity, some park, some memory I have from visiting somebody or doing something. And so I think we are critical infrastructure when it comes to what a city looks like. And I'm grateful that we have the situation we do. And the foresight was there. Whether or not people envisioned what it meant for the long term or not, I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons that you're not Clackamas, not to throw them under the bus right away.
Lots of great things there too.
But I think it's, people would be waking up after a development boom and going, oh my gosh, this whole sector on the east side or wherever that we're developing has no park, has no land purchased for it. How are we going to bike in, you know? And then you're creating bike lanes on the highway.
My dog?
Right.
Where do I go? Because I have no backyard anymore. And it's just, that saying concrete jungle. Well, that's the reality for some places in some parts of the world.
Yeah.
Other parts of Oregon. So, so we are very fortunate. And there's other great districts in Oregon, in Beaverton and Tualatin Hills is a bigger district. They existed before we did. Willamette Lane over in Springfield. So there's other models. There's other districts around, and some small districts too that are doing great things.
Into that space, I want to talk just a little bit about your SDC policy, which is super fun and a great thing. But I know Nathan Hofkamp. He's one of your board members, and he's been a strong advocate for not having park SDCs get into discussions surrounding affordable housing, and it's constantly comes up in newspapers and editorials, and it's something that's worth, I think, debating and talking about. But our paper has been on record, and we've editorialized that we have always supported that with regard to parks, because regardless of what happens in that space, it's kind of very similar to that Chinese wall. That, well, you want affordable housing, but regardless of income, regardless of affluence, you want to have some place where anybody can walk and they're free. I think a lot of times parks certainly require tax dollar support, but to use them, they are free. And I just don't know what staff. I mean, you have to sit. You get a little bit of a shield in front with your board, but as far as those discussions go, do you want to weigh in on that, or am I getting into some hot water for you?
Well, we had a meeting with the city this week about that, so I could say that, as staff and as, I think Park District, we recognize that, housing's critical.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that are critical, though. I mean, we talked a lot about childcare. We're the biggest childcare provider here.
Right.
We subsidize that with our tax dollars. And so we care, and it's just a matter of figuring out, like, okay, here's our lane that we operate in. Is how can we participate? And it may look different than what the city can do or what others can do. And I think, feel pretty good about the choices we've made.
Yeah.
We have done some waivers for system development charges within, I don't know what the right number is, but, we've made some choices. We've done tax exemptions. We do, like I said, scholarships and subsidies.
Right.
We support this community,
and
the people that are here.
Yeah.
So it's a tough conversation, no doubt.
Right.
And
I find it fascinating because it always comes up and I'm always like, what are they going to do? Are they going to give to the city? It's the push and pull. But again, it's like people should understand that discussion stems from the fact that you have your own separate funding. If it didn't, I know where this discussion would go. Immediately those dollars would go down, and people would have less park services and less of those things. Maybe there are people who feel like that would be a good thing, but at least it wouldn't be a discussion. It would be happening in a subcommittee boardroom.
It would be different. And we've people can question surveys all day long, but we've done surveys. We've asked the community when it comes to these issues, what is the role of the Park District? And we've heard pretty resoundingly, provide parks,
right?
Provide childcare. Do those things. The support for some of the other things is a lot smaller. But it's there, and that's why the board is in the policy seat that they are, because they get to decide those things. A survey doesn't like most popular gets whatever, but we have heard that it's like parks matter, and let's not tear down something we do really well, potentially. So it is a fine balance trying to figure that out.
Well, thank you for speaking to that.
Sure.
I won't ask you to speak to. We were talking about childcare, and and those park programs are so massive part of what children do. I don't think there's anybody who has kids who hasn't, in some aspect, participated in one of those programs. I know my kids certainly came up through the soccer program and the art station programs and all that stuff that made Ben great. Lapine had this crazy thing where, that's where everybody's, for journalists, were reporting on it. But I thought about it when we were in the editorial meeting talking about coverage, and one of our reporters lives in that community, and they are bringing their kids to Bend. And I was like, this is a completely unthought of consequence of this kind of thing. But you are going to see a ton more of the program. And my understanding, it's over like angry parents and sideline incidents and stuff. And I'm sure I don't know enough to speak competently about it, but I have enough of the taste. Like, that is such a problem.
It is. It's really unfortunate what's going on in Lapine right now, because who they're hurting is those kids.
Right.
And, we're not in a position to take over Lapine Park and Rec or something. And we're not planning. We were not talking about that. There are people that have asked us, like, can you come down there? And it's
by de facto.
Right. But they're coming
they're
here,
coming to your
which
program.
is also unfortunate.
Right.
So it's a tough situation. That's a district too that, it speaks to, they don't have a lot of funding, and it's really hard to provide service when you're you don't have the funding to do it.
Right.
So they've struggled over the years. They've done some great things, and hopefully they can get everything back on track and have their programs, and those kids aren't coming up to Bend for that. But
it's a lot of driving. You're already, you don't want to have travel soccer before it's time.
I know. And the kindergartners doing travel soccer is probably not the best for anybody.
No.
Yeah, it's, hopefully they can find it in their community and get that back going. So
do you see? I mean, I do think you have an incredible parks program and sports program, but do you see a rise in incidents of these parents? I mean, I used to coach. It was always a very unfortunate part of the experience. And I know from talking to people who are younger than me who are coaches now, and they experience it a lot. And I'm like, well, how much more than me? Because I had some terrible parents, of course. But it seems like it's rising. It seems like people are, bringing their social media brain to the sidelines.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just people are stressed or whatever it might be. I mean, especially I think after COVID, I think everybody's just a little like we were in our houses too long or something. I don't know what it is, but you do see it. I mean, there's amazing people that have their kids in programs that are, community minded and the coaches. I mean, we couldn't do the programs without the volunteers.
You're on volunteers.
And that speaks to like, don't treat these volunteers this way. This is people that are stepping forward when we're begging, please come be a coach. Because if you don't, these kids can't do soccer or whatever. But, we've seen different veins, some behavioral things and with the kids and the families. People are, whatever it might be stemming from, I would really be speculating on that. But, it's... But getting out and running around and doing a sport is actually really good for you as a stress relief. So maybe we should have the parents do some laps at the same time.
I should have. Now that I think about it, they could do the calisthenics, the warm-ups, get over there and kick the ball. Don't watch the game.
Right. Let's just get some of that.
I used to leave my son's soccer game. It would get way too crazy. He got into travel soccer and I had done travel sports as a young adult, and I got there and I was like, what is going on? I was like, hey, I'll be back at the end of this game because they just be getting all worked up. And I love to talk on the podcast about it because it's one of my big pet peeves. It's like, I don't think parents are crazy. I'm like, one of them was like, take him out. I had to turn him. I was like, that's my son. Like, I don't know. Who are we taking out? That little guy? Like,
this is whatever, Little League. We're not in the World Series here today, people. No. This is, your kid is probably not going to be in the NBA. So let's just
they're
chill.
Not pro athletes. I know. They're having fun.
So, I know. People do get pretty wound up sometimes. And excited, I guess.
Well, we are going towards the end, but before we left, I wanted to say, like, future for you. I mean, how long have you haven't been the executive director 6 months?
4 months tomorrow.
Oh, okay, geez, less than I thought. Yeah. Well, at least the fire hose, you're not drinking as much from it. You're kind of pulling it down a little bit. But
I am fortunate. I mean, being here, it'll be 12 years in the springtime. I do have experience here, and I laugh. It's like when I first came here, I was like, I'm learning a new job. I'm learning a new town. I don't know where the pencil sharpener is, and I don't know how to mail a letter. So, I'm not starting at that space. So it's good. And, I get to work with a lot of people that have been there a long time. But Ben Park and Rec, at the same time, people have been there a long time. We have a lot of people that are retiring. I mean, they've, our sports group, speaking of sports, they had over 60 years of experience between folks that retired.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting time. We're in this transition, town's growing and changing. I mean, it's been growing forever, so that's nothing new.
But there's so many new faces in town now. And,
there are, and just, the development looks different, and so it's exciting. Yeah. It's daunting. But there's a lot of fun to be had. So looking forward to it. And, we'll see where we go. We'll be doing another comp plan in a couple years. So that's our big visioning stuff. And
that's nice that you're saying a couple years and not,
not
this
tomorrow.
Year.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of our comp plan. It's so exciting.
It is. We are finishing. We did this sort of we call it a midterm check-in of our comp plan, just to sort of say, hey, what did we finish? Yeah. What's left for the next, 4 years or so? And updating that because we've grown faster than we anticipated. So we wanted to update that. It's we've had an amazing 50 years. I hope we have another amazing 50 years. I probably won't be here at the end of the next 50 years. If I am, it's
good luck to them. But
hopefully we're in as good a spot then as we are now.
Yeah. So. Number one thing on your plate right now, like what are you diving into?
Actually, we've got quite a number of projects. For me, I guess number one is just getting used to my new role
Yeah.
and interacting with people, doing things like this,
Yeah.
Getting to interact with the staff as a
Mm-hmm.
whole. And, if we build our bench, I think
Yeah.
we're going to be prepared for anything
Yeah.
that comes at us. So, and part of our bench is the community too, and our
Yeah.
partners. So,
Do you enjoy that role? I mean, do you like now you're kind of stepping out from behind Don? You're kind of right there. You're in a lot of more meetings, I imagine, more groups. Like some people are like, get me into the park.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I being pulled into all these like 2-hour meetings with so and so?
My natural instinct is not to be the center of the attention of like the big party, but I do enjoy people and I like interacting with people. And so I'm excited for that opportunity. I did some of that, but it was different.
Yeah.
I also just like getting stuff done. Yeah. And so there is a little bit of like, that, probably why I was in planning and development and park services in that role is like, you really could see tangible things getting done. But I am excited. I'm grateful, honored, and I feel super lucky. So I can't wait for what's to come next.
It seems
At least
fun.
I think.
It seems like a really fun job.
It is.
I envy you. It's going to be. It should be a good ride.
Yeah, I think it will be. It has its challenges at times.
Absolutely, absolutely,
no doubt. There's a reason there was a show on TV called Park and Rec.
Right.
So we have lots of stuff we could bring that show back. But it is. It's rewarding. It's fun. It's great.
Well, Michelle, thanks for taking the time out of your day and sitting with us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Right.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This has been the Bend Don't Break podcast. If you've enjoyed it, become a member, help support the Lay It Out Foundation, and help us keep doing what we're doing. Thank you very much. Thanks. You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bensource.com.